I thought we might start with a chapter in your book called Feminism, the greatest bait and switch of all time. And I'll start by saying that I have felt, especially in the last, I sort of always grew up like as a feminist, whatever, guys can do, girls can do better, we can do
Yeah.
bleeding, all these little
Yep.
silly things that we
Exactly.
say. And I've been very, I'll say, disenchanted with the direction of feminism. And in a way, it's become this man hating, cut off your nose to spite your face kind of movement. And I don't know that I identify with it any longer. And even, another piece I'll sort of offer into the ether and to you is I was having this conversation with a friend a couple of months back where, I've been reflecting on my life as you sort of do in midlife. I feel like I've been thinking about all the decisions all the things that have led me to where I am. And I think that I would, if I had another go at it, another crack at life, if I had a redo, let's say,
Mm.
I might not have chosen the doctor route and building, I might have just been like, I'm just going to get some chickens in the back, take their eggs every day and, be a soccer mom and cook, have an ongoing sourdough starter somewhere in the home,
The essentials.
The essentials.
A woman kit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I relate. And I have found myself, and it's lovely to speak to you, and to connect over the course of this journey that I've come to understand is pretty archetypal. There have been points where I look at my life experience and I'm like, wow, that is a dumpster fire, going on in my lifescape. But now I'm in an exhale moment and I can appreciate that, yeah, I've just been walking a pretty archetypal individuation journey, and these ruptures with the fabric of my otherwise crystallized reality are a part of the deal. And so a lot of what I consider myself in a position to discuss is only, the things I wish I had known, right? Because I am a passionate believer that, we have as women the opportunity to hold out a hand in the dark to each other. And even though we know how to walk in the dark, we are literally born to do just that, meaning that we can thrive in uncertainty. We can intuit the next best step without any map, plan, or even guidance. And to feel, your hand, my hand, to feel these women reaching out and saying, hey, come this way. It's one of the greatest pleasures that I've had in my lifetime is to feel that presence of a woman who's just a little bit farther on the path than me. And what is this path? It's not linear, but in terms of really, peeling back the veils and to feel her hand reaching out and saying like, come this way. So, if I were to offer that to myself, let's say 15 years ago self, I might have whispered something along the lines of what we are talking about. And that's not to say that I would have imagined that 15-year ago Kelly would have been able to hear that thing. I remember I was on the Joe Rogan show, and one of the questions back in 2016 that he asked me, he's like, what if you were like in a bar with your 10 years ago then? Okay, so like 2006 self, what the hell would you have talked about? And nothing. Like, we would have had nothing to talk about, right? Nothing in common. And so when you are
And I would have judged her for the drink that she ordered.
1000%, and
Yeah,
many more
yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah.
So when you're in the business of pivots, and you get accustomed to these life pivots, it's not necessarily the case that the more aware version of you can connect to the less aware version of you. And, nonetheless, I might have said like, hey, you think there's a feeling on the other end of this career, right? You think there's an experience that you were born to claim and that it has to do with your mission, right? And I know you've always been told by your mom that it's so essential that you be, independent, an independent woman, a self-resourced, financially emancipated woman. But there's something that you'll sacrifice on that altar. And it's something that you can't actually ever get back in a lifetime. And that something is the primacy of your role as mother. And perhaps relatedly, it's also your experience as a wife in the covenant of marriage. And I have had a wild, beautiful, legendary carpet ride, neglecting that whisper if I even heard it, okay? And I wouldn't actually change a thing. And the experience of my second marriage and the ways that I have become and become and become seemingly all needed to unfold exactly the way that I couldn't possibly have written it. And there is like an anguish, there's a grief. It's actually like a deep fucking sadness around not having had one woman whisper this to me.
Yeah.
That's all. Like, it just feels like, oh, I wonder what might have happened. And it's not to go back and revise it, because there's also something like quite fulfilling about coming upon this understanding now. Right? Like, you and I were having this conversation. It's a part of a zeitgeist. We're all waking up to this, the dupe of feminism. Not all of us, but so many more than, my usual controversial topics attract. I mean, this is, I had a masterclass the other day, and I offered it to women who identify themselves as being overachieving, under-receiving women. Okay, the master class is called Exhale. And I had like literally thousands of women register for this masterclass. Just like on a Thursday. Okay.
Right.
That's like equal parts disturbing and exciting, obviously, entrepreneurially, but it's also quite disturbing that so many of us feel like we're living under that moniker, right? Overachieving, under receiving. What does that mean? That means that we are always on.
Yeah.
And we know that there is an access to our entitlement as a born woman that we have limited. And we know we're responsible for it. So when we talk about this dupe in the book, The Reclaimed Woman, that I just put out, I unpack the tale of the handless maiden. And it's an extraordinary tale. I think it's probably the best folklore around a woman's archetypal journey. And it's many, many winding paths and all of the plot twists and all of these little deals with the devil, that are made on her behalf by her father, and also that she continues to wrestle with over the course of her reclamation journey. And Clarissa Pinkola Estes interprets this tale, and so I reference that a lot. And she talks about the poor bargain. So my definition of the poor bargain is whenever, as a woman, you feel that little no, and you proceed anyway. Right? You feel that this is too good to be true, or is this really good enough? And maybe there's better, even if I don't see it right now. And you proceed anyway. Okay, so that's like you go on the first date and you get the ick, and you go on the second date, right? That's you interview the employee and there's just, there's like a bunch of typos in the email exchange that you had with this person, and you're like, oh, I don't know if it matters, right? Or you are dropping your daughter off at a friend's house and you just get a little sinking feeling in your stomach, and you ignore that. Right? That is the foundational disconnect from our embodied wisdom, our wildness, and our vital force that creates the conditions for our experience of struggle and suffering that we experience as happening to us. The devil did it, right? Kind of a thing, instead of being something that we participate in the architecture of. And the becoming process is developing deeper and deeper intimacy with the honoring of that. I call it a little no, right? Anytime you settle, you are neglecting that little no. Any challenging marriage or romantic experience you've had, I can virtually guarantee you felt in your body from the get that this was not a match for your needs. And you defied that. Why? Because we're kinky as hell and we love to drum up these dramas and we
And
love
fetishize them, right? It's like,
exactly.
oh, and my boyfriend, or oh, and my husband did this.
Yes. It actually, to your point, becomes like somatically arousing, right? So I've been celibate for a couple of years now. And part of the reason that I have committed to this in the wake of my last marriage is so that I can come into sobriety in my system, right? Sobriety in my system means that I acclimate to a new normal of stability, of peace, of relaxation, of harmony, that my system, trust me, initially interpreted as like mind-numbingly boring.
Right.
Like I was like, is this my life? But do I even want to live this life? Right? So I experience in my system, as somebody who's definitely played with a lot of the criteria of love addiction, I experience, even as a serial monogamist, I experience in my system stability, spaciousness, harmony, peace as being largely intolerable. Okay, now a lot of the work that I have done over these years is expanding and titrating into my capacity to hold and enjoy, like truly derive pleasure from the simplicity, from the mundanity, from the absence of the highs and the lows that I was so addicted to.
Yeah.
Now, mostly they were like romantically derived for me, but in the wake of that, trust me, I found many ways to source these dramas, a lot of them through my business, and then just through like conflicts that I'd drum up with like, the roofer or whatever. Like
Right.
I would like a lighthouse, like go searching for something that I could feel disappointed or resentful about. Right. And I like to look at that through as, I was like, I'm a psychiatrist, I was a neuroscience major. Like I'm interested in the somatic dimensions of these dynamics that we think of as just being like part of our life or like maybe even part of your personality and that are driven by the habits that we have of engaging that cycle that begins with the neglect of that little no. So, to answer your question about feminism, I too feel like, I was born a feminist. I can't remember a time in my life that I didn't identify with like female superiority.
Right.
Okay, so even though I was largely subscribed to egalitarian feminism and I'll have what he's having, entitlement, I really harbored a very charged sense of superiority over men. And I manifested in my lifescape more and more evidence that I was more competent, more reliable, more clear thinking, a better problem solver than all of the men in my midst. And you can imagine, as a female entrepreneur and CEO, what it is to run a business, for a decade with that set of beliefs underpinning the hiring of male vendors and honestly, even interacting with females in a hierarchical manner.
Right.
We're not built for that, ladies, okay? We're not. We are collaborative by nature. And so when we mimic men, when we say, I'll have what he's having, and we mimic the men that we are simultaneously, either semi-consciously or subconsciously, deriding, judging, condemning as inferior, obviously there's an inherent conflict there, right? We are, dressing up as the monster on Halloween that we're terrified of. And so
And we
that,
hate, and who we supposedly
exactly,
hate, right? Yeah.
exactly. And so we allowed ourselves in so many ways because of this, I think, biological fear of men, okay? And it is just in my perspective, and not just mine, it's a reality, right? That any man pretty much could kill me with his bare hands if he is displeased with me. Okay. And, I'm a pretty strong girly. I do my Pilates and my pole dancing. And nonetheless, when it comes down to it, that's buzzing in my system as I walk this plane. And whether I'm having sex with men or not, I am coexisting and cohabiting this plane with them. Okay. So, in that reality, of course, it makes sense that I'm going to develop strategies for self protection that are non physical in nature. If I'm already, if I've already lost that battle, then how am I going to defend myself? Well, strategy and manipulation. Okay. So it makes sense that one of the strategies I might employ is to pick up the same weapons I see him wielding. Right. So I allow myself to be colonized by his worldview, by his value system. And I take on these values of achievement, of success, of linear energetics, right? Of productivity, of intellectualism, of aggression, of fighting. Okay. Maybe not literally with my fists, but as a comportment towards whatever challenges I face. Okay. This zero sum game domineering posture is one that I can practice. And I can become pretty decent at this. But what's on the other end of it is, in my opinion, never going to be the fulfillment that actually lands in our system as women, right? So as somebody who has ascended this mountaintop in so many ways and achieved so many of the promises of feminism, right? So, I'm a credentialed clinician. I'm a New York Times bestseller. I have a 7-figure business. I'm a single mom who handles everything by myself. I do not need a man. I have proven that. Okay, on paper anyway. I can tell you, right? Because if you're in that ascension process of imagining that the oasis on the horizon holds your fulfillment, your sense of freedom, right? Because this is what we were promised. We were promised freedom, the freedom that they enjoy, the entitlements that they enjoy. Well, I enjoy all of those. And so the feeling I have is like holding that hand back, in the dark and saying, ladies, we got to go a different way. It's not up here. It's not here. It's not freedom that I ever wanted. And as a health freedom activist, I have deeply felt into that value of freedom. And my conclusion is that all that I've ever wanted is safety. As a woman, I have wanted to feel safe in my body, okay, where I can relax and exhale and be with my body, right? No matter what, truly unconditionally, no matter if the bloating, if the hair loss, if the joint pain, if the irregular periods, if the insomnia, be with this body that I chose, okay? Safe in my body, safe in my relationships, so that I can drop the tactics and strategies, so that I can drop the impulse to get him to see, or anybody else for that matter, my perspective, my hurt, my feelings, and to feel safe in the world, to feel that it's not up to me to provide and protect. So that safety is not on offer through the feminist entitlements that the multi-decade, many iterative versions of this agenda have provided. So what is on offer? What did we bargain for when we said, yes, I want freedom, I want what he's having, and I will do whatever it takes, okay, so that I can pay taxes and vote? Neither of which I personally participate in. Those entitlements are not at this point compelling to me, right? So what actually were we offered? Well, we were offered antidepressants, right, and psychotropics to manage our emotions, right? And that's why I started to note early on.
Managing quotations, right? Like
Yes,
suppress.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? With 1 in 4 women of reproductive age on these meds, this is what we asked for. Okay, so we asked for help, quote unquote, managing, quote unquote, our emotions. We asked pharma to help us level the playing field sexually and reproductively. So we were very excited to embrace birth control, right, so that we would not have to relate to our reproductive potential to this extreme inequity in the reproductive realms with men, right? So that's been leveled by birth control. And we have been offered many, many ways to reject our wombs, to reject our role and pathologize our experience of birth so that it becomes a medical problem, to dismiss breastfeeding as relevant, and to have our babies leave our hands for other hands, just hands, any hands, right? Postpartum. So that what? We can get back to serving the corporatocracy, because motherhood is like just a replaceable role. It's replaceable by any warm body and by any government subsidized entity or system or, poorer bodied woman who is available. So these entitlements have allowed us to participate economically in a system that our conversation here is evidence of, right? So like now we're all doing it, right? We're all girl bossing and we're, working our jobs that we have to work, quote unquote. And we get to express ourselves creatively. We get to earn all sorts of money and have all sorts of fun playing in the capitalistic arena that used to be just his, while we were caretaking, while the value of care was still in place. So now it's all about achievement and productivity, and care is something that's relegated to hourly wages and somebody else who's going to do it for us because it's not that meaningful, the contribution, right? So in this, we have experienced the so-called fruits and promises and benefits, but what are we actually feeling? What I observe is that we are fucking exhausted. Okay? We are wired and tired. We are resentful and bitter, so bitter, right? Like the sort of neon lights is like, look at all I have to deal with. Right? And we're disappointed. Just feel disappointed in so many people around us, so many aspects of life, right? And our bodies are becoming more stiff and rigid. Our experiences of, health and vitality, it just feels like it's ever receding on the horizon. And instead, we have everything from just like malaise, and like a short list of complaints every day to a long list of meds and diagnoses expressing our body's inner conflicts that we then feel is just like another thing for us to deal with. So we've lost ourselves. We've lost ourselves. And that struggle and suffering, I think, is actually a necessary signature to this disconnection. It's supposed to feel bad. It's supposed to feel like what I refer to as a silent scream. Right? Something is wrong. And it's like that Krishnamurti quote I've been, if that's even the accurate source, I've been referencing for so long. Like, it's no sign of health to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society. So good. Look at us. Like, we are not doing well. Whether you look at the pharma stats or whether you look at, the conversational commiseration between two women over coffee, we're not okay.
Yeah.
And this is, in my opinion, its roots are found in the receptivity we had to this agenda because of our unacknowledged fear of men, because of this wound that was handed down probably a few generations now, that you can call the father wound.